Is this thing on? Oh, I think it is. Hello and welcome to my first ever YouTube video. Actually lied, it's my second YouTube video. I made another one this morning, but completely unrelated to what I'm about to talk about. I just wanted to talk about cameras. I've been a sort of avid amateur photographer now for a while. I got into cameras, I think my first enjoyment of cameras was my mum's Agfa, don't know what it was, she probably bought it in the 50s, and she still has it, it's in perfect condition, and as a kid I played with it a little bit, so I always had a kind of background enjoyment of cameras. I tried to get into it on and off over the years, and I really enjoyed it, but kind of put them down, ended up in a drawer, didn't get used much. I'm a musician by trade, but I got to a point where I started using them more and started buying sort of, I wouldn't say high-end cameras. I went out and bought myself a Fuji X-Pro1 used, and I paid about £150 for it. Don't know what that is in dollars, a couple of $100. And I bought the 18mm lens at the time, which was kind of known as their not so good lens, maybe. I loved it. I took some of my best photos with that, and I really got on with that camera. I really enjoyed it. One of the reasons I got on so well with it, and I'm sure there's been videos on the past, is that it has the viewfinder, and it's got a rangefinder style viewfinder on the corner, and I found it very difficult to place the camera up to my eye because I've got a massive nose. That's why. Well, very good prominent Roman nose, if you want to call it that. The corner viewfinder allowed me to place my up in the corner and just rest my nose up against the side. It sounds very sort of de Bergerac, but it's true, you know, and that was one of the reasons why I preferred it. But I really liked the style of it. It was very hipster at the time, and I thought, oh, maybe I should grow a goatee and hang around in Hoxton, which is quite a trendy part of London at the time, and just be really cool and hang out with all the hipsters. I kind of got over that pretty quickly. Once I got a taste for it, I decided to buy a XT1, and I remember taking that to New Zealand, having a bit of fun with it, and took some great shots. I was like, wow, blown away by some of these photos. At some point I'll put some of these up. I've just decided to do this video ad hoc, really, just to talk about cameras. Anyway, not to waffle on too long, I want to talk about my little journey through cameras. So it started off X-Pro1. Mum's camera gave me a kind of taste for photography. I probably bought a Nikon in the past and a couple of little point and shoots that I've dabbled in, and then I got to a point where I wanted a little bit more, and so I bought the XT1, got on so well with it. It was a great little camera, loved it. The XT1 then led me to the X-Pro2 when that came out, and the X-Pro2 was great. Didn't give me quite the same vibe as the X-Pro1. I think what I loved about the X-Pro1, it was just so cheap and I was getting such great results. And then once I started throwing money at cameras, I guess I had higher expectations. But the X-Pro2 was a great camera, you know, and with all the features. I mean, if anyone's into Fuji, they know, you know, how great that camera was when it first came out. Then the XT2 came out, I believe. But in between that, I bought XE3s, the 100, I had a 100T I think it was, and then the 100F I liked. I had that for a few weeks. I've just bought so many cameras. I've had Nikon D850s, I had the D850 for a couple of weeks but took it back, mainly because I learnt on mirrorless cameras really, and I wasn't really a DSLR shooter, so I couldn't understand why I couldn't just point the camera where I wanted, focus where I wanted to, and just take the shot. And I also couldn't get on with the fact that it was a 46 megapixel, 45 megapixel sensor, which was great. I just couldn't understand why the hell it shook so much on that picture. I'm like, I'm trying to keep you still, why are you juddering? And just having that slap of a mirror, kablam, I just wasn't used to it, and I lacked the ability to keep the camera still enough and take those shots, so I was always getting slightly blurred shots even at high shutter speeds, and it was pissing me off, quite frankly. I ended up getting the D850 because prior to the D850 I'd gone on a bit of a journey, and after the X-Pro2 I picked up a Sony A73, which I really got on well with. I love the autofocus. I like the 4K video, and I bought myself a gimbal and I was taking little videos. And I thought, wow, this is amazing for the money. The stabilization, I could take really good portraits with eye autofocus in dark conditions. Bam, nailing those portraits. I had the Fuji, I think it was the X Pro 2, and I had the 56 f1.2, and I tried to do a similar thing, but I could never now focus at 1.2 in low light. Struggled with it. Autofocus, I mean. So it'd have to be very considered photography, not a run and gun style at all. We have to kind of get the person to pose, keep very still, because it's all well and good you keeping the camera still, but if they're going to move, then it's still going to blur your image. And I ended up using it mainly at 1.8s and 1.2 and f2s, even though I wanted to use it at 1.2, because that was the whole point of that 56mm lens. Still a cracking lens though. I'll probably end up buying it again at some point. I sort of veered away from the Fujis at that point, and the A6500 got me a taste for Sony. It got me into the image stabilization thing, and I remember at the time telling people this is amazing. People saying, well, you know, it's not all that it's cracked up to be, so to speak, you know. And I just thought it was the bee's knees at the time. I started watching people like Jason Lanier and various YouTubers and photographers on YouTube, and you get all the rival kind of reports of cameras and what they prefer. You got the angry photographer. There's so many out there. You know, Tony and Chelsea are kind of fairly unbiased, and there's a few that are fairly biased about their opinions, and they sort of one side or the other. Usually you find they're, you know, sponsored by that brand, and they're pushing that brand, and it's a battle of the brands really. But as a kind of neutral observer that just wants to buy a camera, you get really confused by all these conflicting issues. Everybody brings out the highlights and the goods and the bads. And anyway, I've been on a big journey with cameras. I bought loads of different ones. And I've had cameras for short periods of time and taken them back, not been too happy with them. I've tried so many different lenses now on the Fuji systems. I've had the I've had the 35mm, I've had the 23mm, 16mm. I've had, is it the 18-105 on the crop sensor, the 16mm Sigma on the crop sensor, and then I've had the 56 1.2. Haven't really had many zooms. I think 50-200 on the Fuji. It's a pretty good lens, you know, for the money. I've tried loads. Then I moved over to Sony. I bought the A7R3, and what happened was I invested quite a lot of money in the G Master lenses. I bought the 24-70, I had the 16-35, and then I bought the 85 1.8, which was the, in my opinion, still Sony's best ever lens for the price. I had the 55, I've had the 35 Zeiss, I've had loads of them, I can't even remember anymore. And I tried them all. I kind of settled down on the Sonys, but what happened was I went on a kind of on a trip with a friend. We did a rehearsal basically, and we got back from the rehearsal, and I suggested that we stop at a local pub for a beer and a meal. And we stopped at the pub. Must have been there all of 30 minutes. Took one bite of my burger, and somebody came up to me and said, "I'm really sorry, is that your car outside?" I said, "Yes, what's the problem?" He said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, it's been broken into." But shock horror, I had every piece of equipment I owned in the back of that car in the boot. Get insurance if you're into your cameras and you have a lot of equipment. I wasn't insured. It was a smash and grab. They got very lucky very quickly. Probably not a massive amount, but I had about £10,000 worth of equipment in there. But it was everything: my laptop, all my filters, the Sony body, the lenses, the batteries. I think I had about 5 brand new SD cards, UHS 2 cards, all the rigging gear that I had, all the little paraphernalia. It was just ridiculous. It was probably more than 10 grand if I really had it up, but I don't want to think about it. So at that point I bought the D850 because I felt that I could buy second-hand Nikon lenses cheaper. And at the time I thought the Sony system was just a bit too expensive, especially for a kind of amateur photographer that's just getting into it. I went way over budget with my purchases, but you know, I'm one of those guys. I like gear and I like to buy, you know, the latest stuff. I've got over that a little bit lately, but I still indulge. So the D850 didn't last. I then went and bought another A7R3. In my opinion, on the market right now, the A7R3 represents the best camera out there. And the reason why I say that is nothing to do with price. For the price point, perhaps the A73 is, but just if you just take a camera as it is, what it can offer you, to my mind at the moment, there's the D850 and the A7R3, in my opinion, until recently. And what happened was I bought the XT2, and I was trying to kind of do a similar thing that I was doing on the A7R3 with it. So I was really focused in on autofocus at the time, because I was using a lot of gimbal stuff. I still love photography, I do a lot of photography, but I wanted this kind of hybrid shooter that I didn't know what it was at the time. I was doing a bit of both, and I wanted one camera to do it all. The A7R3 works a treat. It's quite an expensive camera. I got to the point where I started shooting a little bit more seriously, and I got asked to do a professional photographic shoot, my first shoot. I went along and did it, and it was great. I used the A7R3 and the A73, and they did really well. I was really happy with the results. It was good. But sometimes I get a bit bored, and I decided to explore. And when they announced the Nikon Z6, I decided to give it a try. I didn't really expect too much from it, which is maybe why it surprised me. I went and tried out the Z6, and the guy in the shop was demonstrating the autofocus, and I'd watched all the videos, and everyone said, oh, it's not quite on par with the Sony's, which quite frankly it isn't yet, I should say. So it felt like he was using an A7R3 maybe, or there's that kind of an autofocus system. Still good, but not quite there. I then did a professional video shoot, and I took along the Z6, the Nikon Z6, and the Sony A7R3, and a selection of lenses. I only had the 24-70 on the Nikon, and I used the Nikon with the Atomos Ninja 5, and shot in 422 ProRes externally. But it was my first video shoot. I planned it meticulously, and no matter how much I planned, everything started going wrong for me. Everything from forgetting to press play and record, and I just made so many mistakes. I was a complete novice, you know. Having said that though, I planned really well, and I just got really frustrated. I had the Sony A7R3 on a gimbal, and I had the Z6 on a tripod, and I was shooting two cameras. But what happened was the Ninja, don't let this catch you up by the way, the Ninja's got the ability to show you what a LUT might look like if you choose to apply the LUT, and I had about 10 LUTs downloaded on the Ninja, and I also had there's also a native setting, and there's also a couple of settings to show you in a more high dynamic range. What happened was I thought I was shooting in external, but in a native profile. But it turned out I think I was shooting f-log and didn't realise, and I had the exposure all wrong. Ended up being a nightmare and pretty unusable. There was so much noise in the shadows because it was a very dark event that I was shooting. It was an award ceremony, and I had the Sony on the gimbal, and because I had so much use of the Sony, I knew what I was doing with it, and thankfully that saved me. Now that's not to say the Nikon wouldn't have worked, it's just that I set it up wrong, and it was a kind of hit and forget. It was unmanned, so I was walking around with the gimbal, and I let the Nikon run as a safety, if you like, something I could cut to, you know. Anyway, it was a fun thing to do. So I've had a bit of an experience with the Nikon. I bought the Nikon as a second camera, and what happened was I got a little bit seduced by its functionality and how cool it was. But I had to keep telling myself, this is the second camera, this is the second camera. I've got the A7R3, which I'm shooting on right now, by the way. So if you like the look of it, I've kind of got it set up in an Eterna profile, and there's a reason for that, and that's because I ended up taking the Nikon Z6 back, not because it wasn't any good. In fact, I put the footage on the computer before I sold the camera and had a look through it, and it was brilliant. A little bit over sharp, but really good in good light. Had a few issues where I tried to focus in low light, and even when I manually focused to the point, it just kept grabbing on to the weirdest things. I tried to shoot some video in Covent Garden. There was a big bright Christmas tree in the background, and I was shooting a face in low light, a friend of mine, and it just wouldn't latch onto him. It just didn't want to know. And I didn't have the Sony with me, but I'm almost certain that Sony would have picked up the face in the centre. especially since I had it on center focus. That peed me off a little bit. Not to say the Nikon's not good, it's just that you've got to use it in the right situations and you've got to be fair. It's a bit like expecting too much from a system, you know, it can't do everything. For my money, the Sony's come the closest for that all-round camera, especially the R3, and the reason why is I don't think the video quality is that much worse than the A73. Yes, it doesn't shoot quite as well in low light, but only marginally, and yeah, the colour profile's a bit weird compared to the R3. I think the A73, I think the A73's got a slightly more flatter, sort of neutral look, slightly closer to a Nikon look than the R3. The R3 does with orangey bits, but doesn't mean it's bad, you know. I'm shooting on it now. I mean, you don't know what my face looks like in reality, so for all you know, it's perfect. And then what happened was I took the Nikon back purely because I was very focused in on the fact that it was a second camera. It wasn't a first camera. I'm not a professional photographer, but I got asked to use second cameras in 2 video shoots that I did. I've got a few more coming up where I'm going to need more than one camera. And then this bad boy came out. This is the XT3. I'm sure you've heard lots about it. You know, we like to hold it up to the camera. Typical YouTube vlogging style. You hold up the product. Here, have a look around it. If you haven't seen it, we've got the kit lens 18-55. To me, this is the perfect second camera, and the reason why is because had I gone into the Nikon system, it was almost like having another A7R3. In that I mean, the lenses, the architecture of it, it's quite an expensive system to buy into. Yes, you can buy old Nikon lenses, but the problem is if you're shooting video, they just don't focus with the adapter as well. I tried out so many lenses, Nikons, high-end Nikons, the Sigmas, it just doesn't grab focus. There is one thing I'd like to point out about this camera that I found out. I can't remember who the YouTuber was, but he kind of mentioned it in passing, but to me it was crucial, and I literally told everybody in a camera shop, sorry if it's focus breathing a little bit there, I literally told everybody about it afterwards, is that when you autofocus, if you're trying out this camera in a shop, make sure that you press record, bring an SD card with you and format it, and actually press record when you're trying out the autofocus. If you don't, it's a very sharp, juddery autofocus. As soon as you press record, you get a very smooth cinematic look to it, and it's much better. So if you're trying out the camera, don't let that fool you. And the reason why I say that is because before I bought the Nikon Z6, I actually bought the XT3, kept it a week, took it back because I didn't believe that the autofocus was quite up to par. And the reason why that was because I hadn't actually tried it out. Sorry, my phone's going. Hadn't tried it out, and what I did was I was just messing around with it, and I thought, oh, this is no good, and put it back in the box and left it, and then took it back a week later. I was expecting too much from it, I think. I thought it was going to be as good as a Sony, maybe. Truth be told, it's effing brilliant. I mean, it's a really good video camera. The Eterna profile that everyone keeps waffling on about is really nice. Some people like it, some people don't, but it looks good. It looks good straight out of camera. You get some really nice vibes out of this camera. I like the fact that it's a little bit stylized, and the fact that you can get a certain look with it. It is a bit hipster, if I'm being honest, but it's really nice. The 10-bit external is great. The 10-bit internal is great, but I just can't use it. I mean, my computer just can't handle the files. So I'll probably still use this with an external if I want the 10-bit. Otherwise, I'll go H.264 with it, because you know, my Mac with an external GPU seems to handle it quite well, whereas 10-bit, you know, it's struggling, you know, at the best of times. So I would suggest that if you can get an external recorder, if you want that 10-bit profile, unless you've got a super powerful computer that can handle it. Otherwise, use proxies in your editing, you know, that's the only other way around it. I'm just sick of using proxies, it's just a pain. My computer, you know, even when it kind of converts them, takes forever, so I'd rather just use external 422 on a Mac, because it just works. It's much quicker to use. I mean, that first video shoot I did, I walked away with a terabyte of footage, and it's just no problem at all. Scrubbing, editing, throwing LUTs on it, it just seemed to handle it really well. I didn't even use proxies. I was playing back at probably half quality, but you know, that was good enough for editing. The X-T3 focuses really well. It's a really good camera. Yes, in slightly lower light conditions, you know, you need to be a little bit kind to it. You can't expect too much, but it's pretty good in low light. It will focus really well. It's great for video. I think the issue with Fuji is they're going to need to develop more lenses that are more suited to video, just so you don't get that sort of slightly pumping effect that you get. And I think that's more down to the lens. I think once they start to develop lenses, and I do think Fuji are going to, not sure when. Obviously they've got their big boy cine lenses, but they're silly money, and anybody in my kind of realms is not going to spend 2-3 grand on a cine lens. You know, I just want a lens that will do well enough for me, and you can still get professional grade video out of this with a photo lens, for want of a better phrase. To me, the 18-55 is the best lens they do. I'm going to explore some of their other lenses. I've tried things like the 56 1.2. It doesn't really autofocus very well. It's an older lens. It's good for photography, but not video. I'm shooting both photo and video. I've kept the A7R3 for the high resolution, and I've got some lenses. I'm shooting with the Tamron 28-75, which is a really good lens for the money. I've had the G Masters. I had the 24-105, which is a great lens, but again, a bit surplus to requirement. For 700 quid or thereabouts, I bought this lens. I think the price might be going up on it, and it's a great lens, that Tamron. I'm really pleased with it. It worked well on a gimbal. When it did lose focus, it did it with style. I got a really nice blurred out, and then it suddenly, or eventually came into focus, and it gave me a look. And actually, people commented on how I managed to get that focus pull, and I said, oh, it's just pure fluke. And also, it is a bit subject to lens flare, and sort of, but it's kind of cool. It looks good. I wish I could show you some examples. I'm just not geared up for showing you that yet. Eventually, I will. But for now, I just want to talk about the cameras. If you're looking to get into hybrid shooting, video and photo, and you don't want to spend as much as R3s, Nikon Z7, Z6s, I thoroughly recommend the X-T3. I really do. Between the A7R3 and the X-T3, or the A73 and the X-T3, if you want to shoot two cameras, and the reason why I talk about two cameras is because I think once you get to a certain point, if you're getting into video, you kind of want a second body sometimes, because you want two angles of view. I know there's ways around it, but I was asked to sort of shoot events at that kind of with the two bodies, and that's why I ended up buying a second body. Now, if I don't get too much work in and I don't have a need for a second body, I've got a serious decision to make. I'll probably have to go and sell one of these bodies. I don't know which one it will be yet, but because I'm so into photography as well, I kind of want to keep the high res. That Sony A7R3 with its ability to crop in Super 35 mode and still get good images, 18 megapixel, it's brilliant. You know, it gives you extra focal lengths. This little Fuji, yes, I don't know what the difference is in light. You know, obviously it's a crop sensor compared to the full frame, but it's bloody good. I mean, it's bloody good. It's such a good camera. I mean, if you're looking to get into photography, I always recommend Fuji's just because of that sort of dial, and it just really shows you the kind of link and that triangle, if you like, and you've really got a nice visual representation of it. With your aperturing there, you know, your shutter speed and your ISO. I just think it's a cracking camera, I really do. Now, if you're a high-end video shooter, there's going to be things on this camera that piss you off. You know, I've heard comments from certain YouTubers talking about the speed of use. But, you know, like most things, you learn to use it. You can set it up in a certain way and get good with it. I'm not a quick shooter. I'm a very considered photographer and a very considered videographer. I do run and gun, but usually it's ad hoc. I just hit record and hope for the best. So the other thing I wanted to mention is if you are considering the Z6, don't be put off. It is probably, to me, it's in many ways much better than the A7R3 or the A73. And in that, the reason why I say that is because the rear panel on the Z6 rather, or the Z7, it's just brilliant. It looks great. When you take a photo of it and you chimp or you have a look at it, it just makes you feel really good. The colour balance looks really nice. when you look through the viewfinder on the Z6, it looks brilliant. It's just an amazing viewfinder. The body is much better than the A7R3, and when I say much better, I don't mean in hand. Ergonomically, I don't mind either or. I use where is it? I use the little extension grip on the R3, and it allows me, I'll show you on the XT3, it allows me to put my pinky there, and it makes such a difference. Really makes the A7R3 or the A73 feel solid, you know. The Z6, you still have your finger hanging over it. I don't know if they're going to bring out a grip or a battery grip. I'm not quite sure. I think there's a bit of controversy behind that. But recently, Nikon and Atomos have announced this external 10-bit RAW. Is it 10-bit or 12-bit? I could be wrong. The ability to shoot RAW ProRes. I think that's really exciting. Ironically, I sold my Z6 the day before they announced it, and I was like, God damn, you know. But I've got the Ninja. I don't think it's going to be too long before somebody like Fuji follows suit. And the reason why I mentioned Fuji is because they don't have any high-end video cameras, so they're not competing with themselves. And I'm holding on to this, and the reason why is because I have a feeling RAW is coming on this. I could be wrong, but that's my instinct. It might be the back end of this year. They might be developing it. They may have seen the announcement and start talking to Atomos. I know that Atomos are going to be wanting to talk to all the camera manufacturers. Canon, I'm not sure they're going to want to follow suit. And Sony, I mean, why would they undermine their own cameras, you know? So I can see why they wouldn't want to add it as a function. But, you know, if they don't add it as a function, then it's going to bring people away from their mirrorless cameras. And so either way they're going to lose if they don't add these functions. And so any manufacturer out there thinking they can get away with it, trust me, you can't. If you don't add the right features to your camera, people are going to walk away. They're going to walk away. Right now, to my mind, even though everyone's going on about the delayed release of the A7S3 and the A7000, Sony are the king of the hill right now for me. I just think, given their price point, their autofocus, just their ability. As far as the Panasonics go, I love the Panasonics. Video, you know, people, you know, these things don't come about for nothing. Everybody's using that camera for a reason. For me, because of the photography side, I wanted a full frame camera that shot video, but I wanted a good 42 megapixel photo camera, and so that's why I didn't really go for the Panasonic. And secondly, I experimented with the Panasonic. I tested it out for about a week, and I'm definitely not a manual focuser. I wanted that autofocus. I want the content to shine through, but I'm not really a video maker necessarily. I just, you know, the end result is what matters to me, and I wanted to get the easiest route. Now, I don't know what this looks like to you guys, but, you know, I've literally just put the camera on and pointed it at me. I've got a little light here. It's a crappy little light that I paid about 40 quid for. I'm seeing weird tones. I'm just looking down at the Atomos on the balance, but, you know, I haven't really set it up properly anyway. But to me, it works really well. Yes, it might lose focus now and again, but it's a great camera to use just on the gimbal. The A6500 is very good. I find they are a little bit warbly, the 6500s, compared to the, you know, you get that shutter roll if you're not careful. So when you're panning your gimbals around, just be aware of that. The thing I learned on my first video job, if you've never done one before, I'm sure there's loads of video guys out there that will sort of back me up on this, is that I realised that you can really get carried away with a gimbal, and the best thing you can do with a gimbal is less is more. Hold your shots longer. Don't move it around too much. It gets erratic, and anybody watching your video will get pissed off watching it. So I learnt that very quickly. You've got to hold the shot longer. Don't be afraid to stand still with it, you know, even though it is a gimbal. But, you know, it's a fun thing to do. I really like using the gimbal. It's great fun, you know. They get overused. But anyway, I'm not really a vlogger. I'm not really a YouTuber, but I decided to get into it just because I've learned so much over the last few years about cameras and different manufacturers, and I wanted to give a kind of indifferent view to these cameras, not from a technical perspective, but just kind of dispel some of the myths. You know, that Z6 is a brilliant camera. If you like Nikon, go and buy the Z6. It is a effing good camera. It looks amazing. The thing that other people don't mention, well, they do mention, but I don't think we make enough. that was a rather abrupt ending, wasn't it? I lost my trail of thought. Sorry, something went. I'm not quite sure what happened there. I think I might have reached the half an hour mark and it just decided to switch off. Anyway, go and buy the Z6 if you love it. Grab the Fuji if you don't want to spend as much on these systems. I would not say 100% that Fuji are going to develop more video-centric lenses, but I think they're going to. I really believe they're going to develop more lenses geared towards hybrid shooting. So that would be good if they do. Fuji, if you're listening, you know what to do, mate. Mr. Fuji to you, sir. And as for Canon, watch Canon. I don't think people are writing them off. It just makes me laugh. A camera company with that history are not going to let these things slide. There is no way they're going to. I think what it is the consumer's getting more hungry, and what we've done is we've got that kind of Instagram approach. It's a very short buzz, a very quick turnaround. We want the next best thing, the next best thing, the next best thing. And I think it's the same with cameras now. Everybody's expecting that next announcement. Chill out. Use your cameras. Go out there and shoot with them and use them for a long time. Do you remember in the old days, some of you don't, but if you ever bought an album, I remember, don't laugh, I remember getting Simon & Garfunkel Alive in Central Park given to me, and I played that album for a year. I wore that album out, and I think we need to do the same with cameras. We need to wear the things out, really use them to their uttermost, and you know, that's how cameras become legendary, when people really get into them and use them and really understand them well. Don't keep chopping and changing unless you're reaching for something. I personally am. I'm looking for a system. I don't know why. Don't know why I haven't stuck with a Sony solely. I had the A73. Excuse the siren. I had the A73. It's a great camera. It was a great second camera. I bought it cheap. I paid 1,500 quid for it, and I was using the same lenses across the two systems, so it was a bit illogical to go out and buy the Fuji XT3 or the Z6. But I don't know, maybe I got a bit bored. That's okay if you do. If you've got the money and you want to do it, that's great. No problem at all. More power to you. But if you're one of those guys, I'm a bit like this, that will go out and watch a million reviews, a million YouTube videos on a system before making a purchase, which I do also, you know, really get into it. I can watch hours and hours of YouTube guys reviewing these various cameras. If you're that person and you want to make a really considered decision, I would say Fuji if budget is more of an issue for you, but you still want great video and photo. 26 megapixel, 10-bit. I mean, come on, you know, that Eterna profile. Everybody's talking about it for a reason. It's not for nothing. The autofocus is cracking. It's not crap. The XT2, take it or leave it, great camera, but for video. XH1, similarly, we didn't nail the focusing as well as they should have. But now, new breeds are coming along. XH2, oh my goodness, I don't know what's going to come with that, but it's going to be good. The new Sony system's coming out. I would, you know, dare I say, maybe even base your decisions on the lenses. Maybe just base it on that. If there's certain focal lengths, and you know, I still find that there's always compromise in cameras. You can never quite find all the focal lengths at all the right prices that you want. You know, I think Sony are lacking a bit in their wider, cheaper lenses. You know, if they can develop more lenses like the 85 1.8 at that price point, and that new body comes out and it's, you know, got better video capabilities. Sony, I mean, they're way ahead of the game with their mirrorless right now. But look at Nikon, look what they're doing. You know, they're being a little bit fearless now. The eye autofocus, if it's as good as Sony's or anywhere near close, it will make a massive difference for portrait shooters. You know, that run and gun kind of. If it locks onto the eye well, that's going to make a big difference for autofocus. If they can get it to do that and the face detect working in combination on video mode, it's great for shooting people while they're moving around. You know, as you can see, you know, Sony looks all right. The focusing's good. I mean, obviously, when I hold up the camera, it's sort of back and forth slightly. It gets a bit confused, but it's understandable. You know, but it's a great camera. They're all great cameras. This is the point. So get into your photography. I would experiment with subjects. You know, what do you want to shoot? What is it you want to do? You know, for me, I got into videography because I book bands and for venues and various things. And I remember not too long ago I booked a band for Alexandra Palace, which is a large venue, and I just wanted to go and get some video of them for a website so I could then promote bands and stuff. So what traditionally would have happened in that scenario is I'd have to find a videographer, pay them, but because I was already into it, I developed these skills. I decided to go and film it and photograph it. I stuck the Sony on a gimbal, a couple of GoPros, had the A73 on a stand, and the video came out really good. I was really chuffed with it. I even used a bit of iPhone for some time lapse and blended that in as well, and I was really chuffed with the results. And that's kind of why I got into video, just for my own benefit really, so I didn't have to rely on other people to do it for me. If you're a YouTuber or a vlogger, you know, these are things and skills that you can develop. There's a guy that wants me to do some YouTube style videos. He's a fitness instructor and he wants to kind of do a lifestyle kind of video, and I think he got a bit impatient. He went and bought a 160 quid Canon. He said, look what I've done, I've made this video, I wish I could show you it. I might ask him to upload it for me so I could show you guys. This guy doesn't have a clue about video. Within the space of a few weeks I was really impressed with what he did, and the reason why he did well is because he had a vision, he knew what he wanted, and it was just about getting there. So once you know what you want to do, it makes it a lot easier to get there, because it's just about, you know, working backwards from the end result. So just the best thing you can do is use your imaginations and come up with some really cool ideas that you want to video or photograph, and then just work out how to make it happen, you know. And all these cameras can help you with that, you know. This is the point. It's, you know, don't get caught up on the functionality as much or the specs. Think about the product, the end result rather, you know, what you're trying to get out of it. So for instance, you know, I'm trying out different styles at the moment. I've been even trying out food photography. I like food photography because it's quite creative, you know. I might start getting into that heavily, you know. So decide what you want to do first, and then base your decisions on what you want. If you're like me and you're trying a bit of all styles out because you're just enjoying the art of video and photo and finding your feet, then by all means chop and change. That's what I did. I chopped and changed just to find it. But what I'm rapidly realising is that they're all great, especially now. I mean, all the different manufacturers are starting to rock a little bit now. You know, Sony's obviously the old rocker at the minute, given that prior to that, Canon and Nikon were the old rockers on DSLR. But in terms of mirrorless, Sony are kind of winning. But you know, people get impatient. Even now I can feel that people are losing their patience with Sony. Personally, I feel it's unjust. I think Sony need time to make sure those cameras come out with the right features and not have to rely on updates all the time. The other thing I would say to Sony, and I think other YouTubers have mentioned it, there's one particular Australian I really love. I've forgotten his name, but he's brilliant and he's really cool. What I like about him, he's really natural, you know. If you're out there, you know who you are. I'm going to say that you constantly drink fake coffee and you've got a bald head and glasses. Can I say that without offending? But I just love your things. But I think you echoed this and you said that Sony need to start bringing out those updates, those firmware and software updates, and improving their older cameras for people that have been loyal to them and spending the money. They're not cheap systems, so you know, give a little bit of love back. We all know that Fuji do that. Nikon seem to be following suit now with their update. They're developing those cameras. I think Canon are going to follow suit with some updates. I could be wrong. So if Sony get that balance right, I mean, can you imagine the next Sony camera? Could you imagine the flip out screen? Even if it's an A7000 shooting, you know, 10-bit internal, 60 frames a second, with that lens system. If they then develop is it the S3 or the A7R3 or the A74, whatever it's going to be, with flip out screens, better touch functionality, they could really nail it. Any one of these cameras could come out. It's almost like, I don't know, it's almost like heavyweight boxing, you know. I'm really into that at the moment, and you just don't know who's going to come and deliver that killer punch. The trend tends to be that somebody steals the limelight for a while, a bit like Man U, and then, you know, somebody else takes over the flag. I think that would be the trend, but I think Sony are going to surprise everyone again. You know, I think they're just ahead of the game with the sensors and with the development. So I think their next cameras are going to be, you know, another game changer. What I don't want to do is keep chopping and changing though. I think if Sony do manage to bring out a killer camera next, for me, maybe at that point I may go all in on Sony and just stick with Sony, just so I've got that lens architecture. Don't hit me for saying that, but just, you know, same lenses across the board. But right now I'm just enjoying the Fuji. And the other thing to bear in mind is if you do want to have two camera bodies, let's say you've got a more expensive system and you decide to go for the Fuji as a second body, the thing to bear in mind is this is a great little camera just to take around with you, you know, as a kind of general photography if you're on holiday, or, you know, over the Sony. The Sony can do it too with the smaller lenses, but, you know, there's that to consider too. It's a lovely little system. You can buy lovely small lenses now on the Fujis. I mean, this system's nice and compact, you know. Anyway, I've talked way enough. Thanks for listening. If you managed to get through all this, wow, you've done well. I'm boring myself, to be quite honest. I hope it came across as natural. It is my first video. It's hard, you know, to be totally relaxed behind the camera. I'm trying to be, and as honest as I can, you know. I mean, people that know me might be able to see if I'm being contrived or not. I don't think I am. But I'm just trying to get across to most people, you know, the info on these cameras so they can make a better decision. It's really hard to choose. Quite fun. It was quite funny the other day. I went into a camera store, and the guy in the camera store said, "Wow, you're here all the time. You've bought so many cameras. What's your opinion? I'm looking to buy a new system." And he was asking my advice. And it was really nice feeling that the guy in the camera store was asking my advice based on the fact that I chopped and changed so much and used so many in the system. So, you know, I guess I got that out of it. And if I can make a YouTube video and it does well, then that means it was justified. You know, I effed about with loads of different systems, and, you know, slowly starting to settle on it. I'm realising more and more that it's about the content now. You know, a shit song recorded well is still a shit song as a musician, you know, but, you know, a great tune is a great tune, and it's the same with video and photo. A great composition, a great video, a great idea, it's still a great idea, even if it looks slightly crappier at slightly lower res, you know. If you're focusing on the content and what you're trying to put across more, then it's going to have more appeal, it's going to have more impact for you than a higher resolution video, you know, 60 frames, 422, 26-bit if that ever exists, you know. If the content is crap, the content is crap. Anyway, I hope my content's not crap. Sorry for waffling on. I'm going to try and edit this down if I can, but that's going to be hard. Bye.